Imagine that you are a Russian soldier destined for the front lines in Ukraine. You're terrified as a new order comes in. Suddenly, there's light in the world again. You're not going to the front. You're heading to Moscow. The smile on your face is massive, at least that is until the rest of the order is relayed. The war isn't over. There will be no celebration. The only reason you're going to Moscow is that Putin is so terrified that he's willing to pull you away while letting more of your comrades die on the front. That's what's happening right now. Putin is so scared for his own life that Russian soldiers are being forced to flee Ukraine to protect him in Moscow. This is as good as surrender for Putin, and the ramifications are massive for the war. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has revealed the desperate move that a terrified Putin just made. Russian air defense units from all over Ukraine are being ordered back to Moscow, along with several other key sites in Russia, to provide Putin and his cronies with protection against the swarms of drones that Ukraine has been launching into Russia. This is a classic example of robbing Peter to pay Paul, and it's going to be devastating to Russia's forces in occupied Ukraine. They're already dealing with the rise of Ukraine's middle strike drones and the sheer havoc that they've wreaked on Russian logistics behind the front. Now, Putin is saying that the weapons that are the frontline forces' only hope have to go back to Moscow to protect him while he sits on his little ivory throne in a bunker somewhere. Here's what Zelensky has to say about all of this. In the Moscow region alone, they have amassed hundreds of launchers. Nearly 90 launchers have been redeployed to Valdai from other regions of Russia, Zelensky revealed. Both of these locations are notable, Moscow for being Russia's capital and the home of the Kremlin, and Valdai because it hosts one of Putin's favorite residences. That town is 500 kilometers northwest of Moscow, which shows you just how far Putin is willing to send Russia's air defense units and the soldiers who operate them to protect his own skin. Don't get us wrong, Putin doesn't want to do any of this. But the fact is that his hand has been forced by a Ukrainian strategy so brilliant that it has forced Russia into a trap. There are no good choices for Putin, and you're going to learn why soon. But first, the big question, why is all of this happening? There's an easy answer to that one. Ukraine has been proving far too often that it can take out some of the most valuable targets that Russia is desperate to protect in and around Moscow. Let's take a step back for a little context. Moscow is hands down the single most protected region in all of Russia, and that protection means that there are already hundreds of air defense systems guarding the city. The Caspian Post calls it an iron ring of layered defenses that surrounds Russia's capital, and that ring has steadily grown since 2023. It now encompasses over 100 individual air defense units, ranging from S-300 and S-400 batteries that supposedly specialize in taking out missiles through to shorter-range systems such as the Pantsir. According to some sources, those air defenses are arranged in 3 rings, creating multiple layers that are supposed to make it impossible for anybody to penetrate and conduct strikes into the heart of Moscow. Russia has even gone as far as placing mobile Pantsir air defenses on top of civilian roofs, all to strengthen the city's defenses against the threat of Ukraine's drones. And absolutely none of it has mattered one bit. Ukraine has utterly rubbished the notion that Moscow is as protected as Putin needs it to be. A series of strikes carried out between May and June culminated in mid-June with an attack against the most important oil refinery in Moscow. That refinery is just 16 kilometers away from the Kremlin, and it produces roughly 40 to 50% of the Moscow region's fuel. The strike saw Russia claim to have destroyed nearly 1,000 Ukrainian drones and missiles across the country's entire territory. But it couldn't stop the drones that hit the Moscow refinery so hard that they led to a terrible black rain showering down on the people of the city. This is Ukraine bringing the war back to Russia, and the fact that the strike occurred so close to the Kremlin would have left Putin with brown stains in his pants. It wouldn't take much for Ukraine's drones to travel an extra 16 kilometers, and it's clear that Russia's air defenses can't stop the massive swarms of deep strike drones Ukraine is now capable of sending. Putin's big problem now is the whole war coming back home to Russia aspect. The people of Moscow are pissed. They were never supposed to be dealing with black rain or literally hundreds of flights being cancelled and delayed due to Ukraine's strikes. Moscow was too well protected for all of this. Except it wasn't, and Ukraine has exposed that fact. And it's not as though the strike on the Moscow refinery was the end of it. On June 27th, DW reported that Ukrainian drones had scored hits on an oil pumping station that is key to supplying Moscow with fuel. So what we're seeing from Ukraine is far from the occasional isolated strike. It's a campaign that is slowly cutting the city off from the key resource that it needs. Putin has been trying to hide all of this from the residents of Moscow, as one who spoke to the Russian outlet Sota Vision said, "I can't say anything about an alert, no sirens, nothing at all. Of course, I hope this is under control, but it obviously causes anxiety." Kremlin cronies are actively denouncing Russians who share pictures and videos of Ukraine's successful attacks against Moscow, as they all expose Putin's narrative for the pack of lies that it really is. The reality, as so many Muscovites are coming to realize, is that the air defenses that supposedly made their city impenetrable simply aren't good enough. The people know that they aren't really protected. And Putin knows it too. The veritable drone armada that Ukraine has been sending Moscow's way has consistently overwhelmed Russia's air defenses for months. Years back, when Ukraine didn't have a stockpile of long-range drones, Putin could pass all this off. Sure, Ukraine would strike, but it would usually hit targets in the border regions and other areas of Russia that are of little consequence to Putin, socially speaking, if not militarily. But now the strikes are growing more effective. They're being launched in far greater volume, and they're going deeper than ever before. The Wall Street Journal highlights Ukraine's ramp-up in 2026 alone, noting that there were fewer than 10 confirmed Ukrainian strikes on Russian targets in January, but the number is now above 30. Bear in mind that this only covers fully verified strikes. Firepoint, which builds the FP1 drone that is used to carry out so many of these strikes, says that it's looking to produce 300 of its devastating drones every day, each of which can travel between 1,600 kilometers and 3,000 kilometers, depending on the version. Throw modified Neptune missiles, Firepoint's own Flamingo cruise missile hybrid, and many more besides into the mix, and you get what is happening in Moscow. The Iron Ring isn't big enough to stop them all, so Putin is forced to pull air defenses from the front to protect himself, the Kremlin, and the average Muscovite from the fact that the war he started has explosive consequences in Russia's most important cities. Not that it's likely to matter much. As the Telegraph points out, Russia's entire air defense network, including the Iron Ring that surrounds Moscow, was never designed for what Ukraine is doing. The systems in that network, many of which are antiquated designs dating back to the Soviet era, are made to deal with conventional missiles and aircraft. Drones weren't even a thing when they were designed. And though that doesn't necessarily mean that drones can't be destroyed by these systems, the sheer volumes at which the drones can be launched at Moscow means that they can't fire enough missiles to stop Ukraine's assaults. Images are even circulating online of Pantsir systems carrying 2 missiles rather than their usual 6, suggesting that Russia is dealing with an interceptor shortage. CBS News adds that Russia is running out of S-300 air defense missiles, and based on Ukrainian estimates that Russia had about 400 interceptors available for its S-300 PM and S-400 systems in 2025, it seems likely that the missile shortage is affecting all of the air defense units that Putin had already stationed around Moscow. So more units are being moved to Russia's capital city, along with the missiles they hold and the troops that operate them. Putin's philosophy seems to be that if the Iron Ring isn't enough right now, then more will make it strong enough. Maybe he's right, as unlikely as it seems. However, the sheer desperation in this move is revealing. Putin has been forced into a choice that he never wanted to make, but he's made it, and the ramifications for his Ukraine invasion are massive. This single choice could change everything, and it's exactly the kind of thing that we cover here at the Military Show. Now's the perfect time to subscribe to the channel before we get back to the video. Here's what Putin has really done when moving air defenses from the occupied territories back to Moscow. Russia's leader has made a conscious decision to weaken one to strengthen the other. That's pretty clear for everybody to see. Putin was faced with a choice between protecting himself and Russia's capital city or ensuring that the hundreds of thousands of soldiers that he has sent into Ukraine had something resembling protection, and he chose himself. Again, that sends a message to anybody that Putin sends into Ukraine that their lives are far less valuable than his, which they already knew, and that their lives are also less valuable than the perception of the average Muscovite. Putin is so desperate to ensure that Moscow's people don't see the ramifications of the war that he started that he's willing to let more of Russia's soldiers die on the front just to maintain the illusion that everything is going well back home. It's a sad state of affairs that speaks to Putin as a person. And best of all, Ukraine knew that this was how Putin would react once the drones reached Moscow. That's the genius of the deep strikes. It's not about oil refineries being hit and black rain soaking the people of Moscow, though those are all superb outcomes from the Ukrainian perspective. It's really about setting Russia's military up to fail inside Ukraine, because Putin is abandoning the soldiers left on the front now that he has withdrawn air defenses to Moscow. Zelensky has plenty more to say after delivering the news. After revealing that Russia has pulled air defenses from the front to protect both Moscow and Kerch, which has also come under fire from Ukraine's drones, Zelensky said, "Basically, there are two perimeters the Russians have been ordered to protect by weakening other areas on their own territory and in the temporarily occupied territory of Ukraine. We will draw the necessary conclusions." We already know what those necessary conclusions are. We've been seeing them in occupied Ukraine for weeks, and they're only going to be more conclusive from here. Ukraine's middle strike campaign is the conclusion being drawn. That campaign has already broken through Russia's air defenses in the occupied territories, to the point that Ukraine has been able to launch its logistics lockdown campaign, which is in the process of isolating Crimea and is also forcing Russia's forces at the front to enter the battle without the support they need. Ukraine has been targeting Russian air defenses constantly throughout 2026, with CNN reporting that Ukraine's armed forces claim to have taken out 106 anti-air elements since the beginning of the year and over 1,400 since the war began. The Middle Strike campaign, which targets Russian military assets and logistics up to around 300 kilometers behind the front lines, is the result of this campaign. You could argue at this point that Putin is moving air defenses to Moscow as much to protect the systems that Ukraine has been destroying as to guard Russia's capital. But whatever the case may be, Ukraine isn't going to relent. On June 26, just a day after Zelensky's air defense revelation, Ukraine's president announced a 40-day operation that is designed to pressure Putin into ending his invasion. That campaign is going to rely heavily on the long and medium-range strikes that Ukraine has already been using, Zelensky says, with Crimea and Moscow likely to remain priorities. The day before, Ukraine's defense minister Mikhailo Fedorov took to X to announce that much more is coming to Russia in the occupied territories, tightening the logistical lockdown of the Russian army and launching the first open tender for a record procurement of middle strike drones. In recent months, Ukraine has significantly increased its middle strike capabilities and initiated a logistical lockdown of the Russian army, he bled. Therein lies the genius of Ukraine's strategy. What Ukraine has done here is to strike Moscow to create weakness on the front. Ukraine knew exactly how Putin would react to Ukraine's drones reaching Moscow, and it's baited him into a trap perfectly. Putin did the Putin thing, protect himself and his cronies. Now that opens the door for Ukraine to achieve even more success on the front, and we've been seeing Ukraine achieve plenty of success already in 2026. As Russia Matters reports, the year has already gone terribly for Russia in terms of capturing territory. It points to figures from the Institute for the Study of War, or ISW, which says that Russia has suffered a net loss of 51.7 square kilometers between May 26th and June 23rd, when discounting the territory Russia claims to have gained, but has only really snuck one or two infiltration units into. Russia is already losing soldiers at a rate of between 30 and 35,000 per month, and its daily losses are well in excess of 1,000 in June. The 24 hours up to June 27th alone saw Russia lose 1,350 soldiers, Ukraine's Ministry of Defense reports. What all of this tells us is that Ukraine already has momentum, built on the back of deep strikes, middle strikes, and a vicious defense on the front. And now that it has lured Putin into its pitch-perfect trap, it gets to build on that momentum. Ukraine has already gained fire control over key portions of the Donbass and Crimea using its drones, meaning Russia's forces can't attack freely, and every assault they launch already comes from a disadvantaged position due to their supply lines being cut. Now that Putin is pulling air defenses back to Moscow, the middle strike campaign is going to intensify. Ukraine will launch more strikes and, crucially, will have an even higher success rate than it already has. And all of this during the height of Russia's summer offensive. As we said, genius. Force Putin to create weaknesses on the front, and opportunities for counterattacks and more casualties arise. And there's a nice little bonus to all of this. Ukraine will be paying very close attention to the specific sites where Putin sends the air defense units that he's taken from the front lines. We know it has that capability. Ukraine has an entire shadow army in the occupied territories that is watching and waiting to see where gaps open up, so that information can be delivered. In Russia itself, groups like Artesh conduct sabotage operations in Moscow and will have eyes on potential targets. When those targets start to get bolstered with more air defense systems, Ukraine will know about it. When those targets start getting bolstered with more air defense systems, Ukraine will know about it. When targets in the occupied territories get weakened, Ukraine will know about it. Putin has been forced to hand valuable intelligence to Ukraine by letting himself get caught in a trap. And as soon as the withdrawn air defenses are in place, Ukraine will know exactly what Putin doesn't want the drones to hit. You don't need to be a great military tactician to figure out which sites will be getting visits from drone swarms so massive that the new air defenses won't be able to stop them. Oh, and there's one more thing. Ukraine has Gripen fighter jets incoming. That batch should arrive at some point in the next 10 months or so, maybe even before the end of the year. They'll also be equipped with Meteor missiles, which have a range of more than 100 kilometers and travel at speeds above Mach 4. If all works out in Ukraine's favor, those jets will be entering an environment where the Russian air defenses in the occupied territories are weaker than ever before, allowing Gripens and other fighter jets to carry out more lethal sorties against the Russian rear. Ukraine has created a perfect storm, and Putin is caught up in it. No matter which way Putin turns the Russian ship, the water is still coming on board. If he withdraws air defenses to Moscow, as he's doing, then Russia is weaker in the occupied territories. If he keeps those defenses where they were, then Moscow, Kerch, and every other high-value long-range target are weaker. There's no winning for Putin here, and the decision that he has made has basically invited Ukraine to build on all of the success that we've already seen in 2026. Does this mean an all-out offensive is coming from Ukraine? No. But it does mean that Ukraine can launch targeted counterattacks to retake territory, as well as attack the regions that Putin has just weakened. That just starts a cycle. Air defenses will then be moved to those targeted regions, opening up more opportunities, and so on as Ukraine whittles away at Russia's defenses. None of this has happened overnight. It's the result of years of work, fighting, research, development, and planning by Ukraine. All of that work is now coming to a head. And Putin has just learned that he spent the past 4+ years stumbling right into Ukraine's trap. Now that air defenses have been withdrawn to Moscow, we have a pretty good idea of what's in store for the occupiers. Yet more targets being struck. Ukraine was already doing well enough in that department. Over 800,000 verified targets have been hit in 2026 alone, and there's a lot more to come. Find out more by watching our video. And if you enjoyed this video, hit subscribe and keep an eye on your feed to see what the military show has in store next. And thank you, as always, for watching.